Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Health and Wellness Live. Let's talk about it with myself, Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman, and Lucy Salem. Just before I introduce you to Lucy, just wanted to say that the both of us got together. We thought this was Mental Health Week, that we should do a special show for that. The idea is to break the stigma, to have a conversation, and to bring out in the open the easiness of talking about mental health issues, just the same as we would with physical issues. Right, Lucy? How are you doing?
Exactly. I'm okay. How are you?
Great. So this is our first show, and hopefully it'll be one of many. Well, what we got today, Lucy?
So we have someone who, in my view, is the perfect example of a massive success story. She's incredible and she's inspirational, but she just doesn't believe that she is. That's the issue. Yeah. And she's very, very open and honest about the struggles that she's had. Predominantly sort of workplace anxiety, I would say. But I think this is going to be really prevalent as we go forward, as we lockdown sort of eases and people go back to the office. There's going to be all sorts of complex issues that need to be dealt with. So I just thought that Emily, who you're going to meet now, would be great to sort of speak out about that, hear her story, and probably inspire people to talk if they are struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very brave. We're going to meet Emily in a second. And yeah, I think I agree with you entirely. I think this is the time, because as we start to come out of lockdown, I reckon things are going to have a knock-on effect, and people are kind of holding on as best as they can. But when things start to go back to normal, if you say, then that's when a lot of the stuff starts to happen. So without further ado, let's bring Emily on. So hi to you, Emily, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Emily, I know you're really open and frank about the issues that you face. Could you just give us like a little overview of the daily struggles that you have? Obviously, you're in a very, very high pressured job, and you have only you started this job at the beginning of the pandemic, which was the ultimate baptism of fire. Just sort of give us a little overview of how that experience has been and what you might have encountered.
Yeah, I think I've suffered with workplace situational anxiety for quite some time, mainly since I qualified as a lawyer, which is in the industry itself is quite high pressured. It's long hours, it's competitive, and I personally believe that my anxiety stems from feeling imposter syndrome, which is I only recently found out was a thing about 2 years ago. Coming back from maternity leave, I have work-life struggles, and finding that balance is very difficult. I was always setting myself back from progressing further, promotions. I'd be saying I'm not good enough to do that, and I'd have people tell me, actually you are, and you should be putting yourself forward. And I think if I ever had an issue where I was struggling mentally with that imposter syndrome, I would feel a bit worried to say something, because I feel like it would come across as I'm being weak. So I've always had those issues to deal with on a daily basis, and I am trying to tackle it, and it is difficult. But there is steps you can take.
Well, I was just going to say, when you have that overriding sense of fear and it sort of consumes you, how do you actually feel? Because I know you've told me in the past that it presents itself as a bit like a panic attack.
Yeah, sometimes public speaking is obviously terrifying for a lot of people. It's something that I just have to face, and I have to do it. And I think that the way I deal with it is just trying to, how I feel is that sometimes I could be having like an out of body experience where I'm watching myself. It's very strange. I've never had a panic attack, I don't think. But I have had situations where I feel like I'm not there, and I'm watching myself and I'm critiquing myself, and it's all negative thoughts, and it's never positive. It's, I've come across terribly here, or I've come across terribly there. And I've decided that I want to try and eliminate that as much as possible, because it is just not healthy. It's not going to take me forwards. It just something has to stop, and the negative thoughts aren't real, and it's always in your head, and it's built up worse and worse.
Yeah.
How does that consume you?
It would just make me anxious. I'd feel very unsettled, not comfortable, dreading things, or I'd be just imagining things that haven't even happened yet, and that aren't going to happen. and didn't actually happen. So
Imposter syndrome, has it stopped you at the moment from actually doing anything, or is it something that you just kind of carry with you as
I do just carry it and just go with it, and trying to improve and battle through it, and try and ignore it. And I do seek advice to help with that. I've been seeing a life coach recently who's really put things into perspective for me. And it's all about manifesting that positive thoughts and just trying to ignore those negative thoughts. It's easier said than done, but it does help, and it has been helping me a lot along the way.
It took you a long time to get to the point, though, where you sought help, though. You kind of suffered in silence for a very long time, and it did affect you mentally, at the weekends, and it took so much joy from you.
Yeah, it did. And I decided that I knew something had to change, that I didn't want to necessarily come speak to people about it, because, like I said, I didn't want to come across as I'm being a little weak here. And I think that in a workplace, sadly, that I feel that could sometimes come across that way. People want, some managers want strong leadership, and sometimes I feel like they could see that as a weakness, whether it's in my head or not, I don't know. But I never said anything, and I thought I will seek out something privately, and which was an independent life coach who was able to then ask me what it is that I want to achieve, and look at taking positive steps forwards, not negative, and get rid of all that negative energy. And that's what actually caused me and made me make a step forward, which was to change my job. First of all, apply for something that I thought I never would get, and she encouraged me all the way through that, and actually ended up getting the job, and now I'm there. And
well, you're very brave in coming on here, Emily, and I really appreciate it. Hey, Lucy, absolutely amazing. We have with us another guest I'd like to bring into the conversation, and it's Dr. Leveson, who's one of our leading psychiatrists, and maybe she could just add to the conversation and see what kind of contribution she can make, and give a kind of an all-round idea of even what imposter syndrome really is. So I'd like to welcome in Dr. Leveson. Hello there. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So Emily's been talking to us about what kind of work anxiety and some imposter syndrome, that from my experience of imposter syndrome, as it happens, the most successful people out there tend to actually suffer from it. I know I have a bit of imposter syndrome myself. And most of the professors that I've come across, my own mentors, have also experienced this. Maybe you can kind of give us an idea, what that actually is.
Thank you. Yes, I think we have been hearing a lot about people, especially when they become more successful, and they talk about feeling like an imposter, as if they're not really the right person for the job, as if their feelings, as if their talents have been
fraudulent.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And but I mean, I'd be cautious of medicalizing it and diagnosing it and saying that it is actually a recognized diagnosis. But I think it is something that is very common, and I would almost maybe want to say that maybe women have been more forthcoming with that, perhaps. Possibly due to a sense of lower self-worth, a feeling that they're not really up to the task. I mean, I would be cautious against diagnosing such a thing as a psychiatrist, but I think it would be really important to explore what are the underlying reasons and why someone is feeling the way that they're doing, and then how that feeling affects their day-to-day mental well-being and their relationships with others.
And the anxiety that comes with that, like that workplace anxiety, does that go kind of hand in hand then?
Yes, I think it would be, quite common what Emily has been sharing. When we all feel anxious, we can all, it's a response that we have to a feeling of threat. So we can feel it in our body as palpitations, as funny feelings in our stomach. What Emily said about a feeling of depersonalization, as if having an out-of-body experience, that's very common. I mean, getting feelings like pins and needles. But it's for lots of people, it is a constant sense of worrying that things will go wrong. And yeah, I mean, although as human beings we can all feel anxious, it does become a problem when it becomes almost out of control, or when it impacts one's life day to day.
What do you think, in your opinion, needs to change? Because obviously there's going to be so many more issues than we've ever experienced before amongst people who perhaps don't even want to stop working remotely and go back into an office and be around people. It's not just going to be, imposter syndrome. There's going to be a hell of a lot more issues going on than that. What do you think bosses need to be doing now as we go forward out of this pandemic? Because there really needs to be more of an emphasis on duty of care to their employees.
No, I agree. I mean, people might be reluctant or worried about getting back to work. That might be because of, again, being in close spaces with other people, maybe a risk of catching infection, or they might have gotten used to being at home. I mean, something that a lot of practices do say, again, just from the top of my head, is when women come back from maternity leave, or someone who has been on a period of sickness leave for whatever reason, they can have like a graded return. I think one thing that's really important is for the employees to be able to feel open, and they can actually share their concerns or their worries with their bosses. So an environment where this is accepted and encouraged is really important. So again, breaking the stigma and allowing people to actually feel okay to share their worries, because a lot of people don't, because they worry that they will be, say, dismissed, or it will affect their career progression. So I think bosses should really be encouraged to allow their employees to be able to share their worries, and then perhaps proactively bring this up and say, look, some of you might feel worried about coming back, and how can we make this easier for you? Can we think about perhaps home working and coming into the office, but just allowing a shared discussion and shared decision making.
I know in my last career, you might find something in this as well, Emily, because in my last career we had like psychological services. You could go to them, and if you had a problem. And I never went near that place, even though there were certain times when I actually needed it, because I just couldn't trust it. Right? I just thought, if I go in there and say, "Oh, I'm having some anxiety or nightmares or whatever," then I was sure, even though they promised that they wouldn't, of course, but I was sure that it wasn't going to be as confidential as it was made out to be. Do you have any kind of similar experiences of that, Emily, that you kind of don't want to, bring your employers into the story?
Yeah, I think employers do really try and put services in place, but like yourself, I also wouldn't necessarily trust it. I feel like, is it an HR issue? Is it going to be shared with HR? Is it, I don't want it to be an HR issue. It isn't. Yeah. It's a personal issue, and it's very separate. So like yourself, I didn't utilize any of that, and I personally wouldn't. And that's why I sought my own assistance, a life coach, as in a counsellor or a psychologist, a psychiatrist. They're there just to guide you, and I thought that's all I need, a little guidance, a little push, and so that worked for me. That might not work for everybody, but that certainly helped me. But yeah, I agree with that.
So I just want to pick up what Lucy said, because I think it's really important, which is what can employers do, right? And I think what I experienced, what Emily experienced is, I've spoken to other people, it's quite common that you're not going to use and which is a waste, right? Because this service has really been put up. They've got good intentions, but it's kind of natural that you're not going to go there because you have a fear that it's going to affect your job. So maybe there's something that can be done. I don't know if it's a tax break. I don't know if it's an employer kind of perk thing that they say, look, if you're going into an outside independent, then we can help subsidize it in some way or bring in some sort of thing like that.
Absolutely.
I think that would be more efficient.
It's expensive. It's roughly. I think I was paying £50 an hour. It's a lot of money. It could be, and that's cheap. I think it could be way more than that. So, because it was somebody I knew. But yeah, I think if they could provide some assistance with financially helping people with that, then I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, Lucy.
I was going to say, do you think it needs the government to sort of do more with, in terms of maybe a campaign, a Break the Stigma campaign, a mental health campaign? We see all these other campaigns, but I've never really seen, even on the TV, like adverts, things like that, just to bring it to the forefront of people's minds. I mean, on social media, we've got all these influencers raising awareness, but should the government be doing more?
Emily?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the starting point, and that would certainly help everybody. It's just in everyone's interests that it gets it's dealt with as soon as people have these feelings building up, that they can get that support that they need. And if awareness is raised through the government, then it'd be fantastic. Absolutely.
What do you think, Dr. Leveson?
I think we absolutely need much more investment in the mental health services and provision of mental health care.
So as we come to the end of this first edition, I'd just like to do like a one round for everybody, just to kind of give first of all, why did you come on here, and what do you think about the idea of breaking the stigma? I see that Emily came on, and really, really brave of her, and I really appreciate that. I think it should go a long way if we share this out. People see that somebody who's a lawyer, who's respectable profession, will come out and say, look, I'm also experiencing these things. I think it's a great way of influencing other people to say, you know what, maybe it's all right to come out. So let's go one round. Emily, Dr. Leveson, Lucy, and I'll finish off.
Yeah, I just think that it's a lot of people suffer in silence, and they shouldn't. And I know myself from colleagues around me, they all experience it in a different level, some more so than others, but every single person has some anxiety in some way, in some form or another, whether it's social or medical health anxiety or work-related anxiety. And so it's so important that we are able to talk about it more openly and freely, and not feel worried that we'd come across in it feeling weak or anything like that, because it's not that at all.
Thank you, Emily. Dr. Leveson?
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I think this is a great idea, and it will go towards informing and hopefully encouraging people like Emily, and I think all of us, to come forward and share their experiences, and then talk more openly about what sort of things can help. Thank you.
Lucy?
I think that we should all have a responsibility to check people are okay. Just asking if they're okay, but are you really okay? And giving them the opportunity to be open about the fact that they're not might go some way in sort of starting that dialogue. I think we all need to be checking in on each other more and make that, the one thing that we do every day.
That's a wonderful idea. Cindy has written in and said, as a counsellor, she kind of agrees with what we were saying. In a work setting, she knows there's people that won't approach her. So it's kind of, confirming what we were saying. Just to finish off this wonderful, thank you, first of all, for everybody coming on. Thank you, Lucy, for being a wonderful co-host. I've experienced anxiety myself. I've been to a psychologist for 3 years. This was many years ago now, before I even got into this profession. It was actually one of the things that got me into psychology in the first place, as I was an actual client. And I realized how important it is to go to a life coach or a therapist and get some help if you need it, because it can actually be life-changing. I agree with you all. Anxiety hits everybody, especially in a world pandemic. We're all going to have some thought of it. As Dr. Leveson said, not everything needs to be medicalized. But yeah, find some way of treating it, whether it's going to a life coach or, doing something that's healthy to do. Getting out there in nature is the theme of Mental Health Week this year, is getting out into nature, do some exercise, eat well, sleep well. I think all these are the things that we need to be taking care of. In the meantime, thank you everybody for coming along. Thank you, Lucy, for being a wonderful co-host on this first show of ours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.